everyone. If you are just joining us, please write hello on the chat and where are you from, and let me get us started. So, today on today's webinar, we're going to talk about the Effective Implementation Cohort project, and the EIC aims at increasing. Are you control? I'm sorry. Yes, you're increasing. The EIC aims to increase the school district's capacity to implement a high-quality middle grade curriculum to accelerate learning for students experiencing poverty, Black, Latino, and English learners, designated students. As part of this work, the EIC will learn and share with others outside of the project what districts need to have in place for effective implementation, what aspects of implementation at the district and school level most benefit priority students, and the work involved in making site-wide implementation successful. So for our EIC, we had our learning agenda that had 4 categories. And those categories were the learning questions that we were tasked to answer. Those learning questions were within the category of application of established practice, and what does that take? What is the variability if in implementation across our cohort and within various contexts, as well as what are those enabling conditions that support the implementation, and questions related to measurement. So I'm not sure, did we put in the chat a link to our cohort-wide learning agenda, but I will invite you to access the learning agenda to learn more about this work. As part of our cohort learning agenda, to answer all of those questions, we collected data at different levels of the system. This was an effort between NIRN as the learning partner, our providers who were supporting our local education agencies, and also, as I said, at different levels. So we had student level data, teacher level data, teacher and school level, right? Building level, where our leaderships, our principals thought about the implementation of the curriculum. We also looked at the different district level data, having, in terms of the district capacity, and our teaming efforts, our reach that we had within the districts to implement, and we also evaluated the quality of professional learning services. There is more about, I'm summarizing in a nutshell what the project involved, but there were several levels of complexity in terms of our data collection, and also on the efforts that districts and providers put into this work. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Rebecca.
Right. Thank you, Jimena. So our team had the amazing opportunity this summer to really spend 2 solid days talking as both researchers and evaluators and implementation practitioners and TA support to really dig into our information and our data from this project over the last couple of years. And I don't know how the rest of the team feels, but it was a really amazing, powerful experience for all of us to be in the same room and really hash out what we experienced on the project. And what we came out with was really 3 big lessons learned. When we look at what we learned around our cohort model approach to this project, the implementation data that we used, and specifically some things we learned about the importance of exploration stage. What we're going to do is we are going to provide you an opportunity to jump into the space that feels good for you today and what you want to focus your learning on. We're going to have some concurrent rooms where you get to self-select and go in. Now, this does not mean you have to turn on your camera and engage. You are welcome to keep your camera off. You are welcome to continue to eat lunch, which some of you may be doing, or you can also turn on your video and engage with the speakers as they go on. So your level of engagement is up to you into these rooms, but we really wanted you to provide a smaller space to really think about our lessons learned. So we are going to provide you with the option to do some self-selecting of where you would like to do your learning. We are going to break these up in 15-minute segments. You'll get to enter 2 out of the 3 spaces. So you'll go into a concurrent room for about 15 minutes, listen to the presentation, engage if you are comfortable doing so. And then we're going to bring you back into this space, check in, send you out for another 15 minutes. And then when you come back, we're going to go over our key takeaways over the last 3 years of our project, and then provide you with the Q&A session with the whole team. Okay. So before we open up those breakout rooms, you'll see the 3 topics up on your screen. I'm just going to pause to see if there's any questions regarding what our next step is for our webinar today.
All right. Hello, everyone. I think we might have a couple more people popping in, but we can go ahead and get started. And Mary, I know your camera's off. I'm not going to make you come on, but I just want to say it's great to see you after all this time, even if it's just your little profile picture. So I just wanted to give you a shout out. And hey, Kira, how are you? Good to see you. Lots of familiar faces across all. Welcome. I hope everyone's doing well.
Amy, how are you doing?
Doing
You
really
still have a
well.
house?
We still have a house. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're here.
So glad you're here.
All right. All right. Well, if more folks join us, we'll just bring them into the fold as we get going. But it is so good to see you all. I think everybody may know us at this point, but just a couple of quick intros before we get started. I'm Stephanie Kennedy, an implementation specialist at NIRN. I'm joined by 2 of my colleagues. Amy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Amy Jablonski, also an implementation specialist with NIRN on this project.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm a research assistant with NIRN.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the cohort model approach that was used in this project. And by the way, feel free to, put questions or comments in the chat, or if you want to just come off of mute and jump in, that's totally fine too. I'd be really curious in hearing any reflections from folks who are part of this project, who maybe are using a similar approach in other work that they're doing, or just any thoughts from others about how you might want to incorporate cohort-based learning into your practice. And then, of course, just any questions you have about the activities that we conducted in the EIC. So some of the most important elements of implementation are collaboration, relationship building, and that ongoing learning piece. And so I think what was really amazing for us to see, as Rebecca mentioned, in those sort of 2 days where we were reflecting and gathering on our data, is just the impact that we saw from bringing the 19 different dyads together. Each of the dyads had their own sort of internal implementation teams and support systems, but they also created broader ones with each other as they embarked on this implementation journey. And despite districts being, quite different from each other in things like size or location or culture, et cetera, the times where they were able to come together really created these wonderful opportunities for conversation and connection and to get inspired by each other's implementation efforts. So along with the implementation support that NIRN tailored to each dyad, NIRN also convened the cohort in a number of ways that would supplement their learning around implementation practice and bring them together into a shared space. Again, knowing that collaboration and relationship building are 2 of those most important things for effective implementation. So those included things like quarterly online learning sessions, our annual in-person convenings, and an optional deep dive learning partnership, which we'll go a little more into detail in just a minute. But I think, as we were looking at some of our data and of course, throughout the last few years, hearing anecdotally and seeing from our position as implementation specialists, we were hearing from districts and providers that The implementation learning was, of course, very helpful and really important. They were getting a lot from that, but what really boosted that even more was the opportunities to network and hear about each other's experience along the way, whether that was from, districts that were very similar to their own or in completely different contexts. It really helped them to digest and consider different implementation concepts and inspire them to try new approaches in their own context. So one of the opportunities for cross-dyad connection came in the form of our in-person convenings. So NIRN hosted 2 multi-day in-person convenings, one in 2023 and one in 2024, one in San Diego and the other in Austin, which despite each year turning out to be pretty rainy, stormy weather, I think we're really a kind of a breath of fresh air for folks that are used to seeing each other just kind of in our little boxes on Zoom. So what were these annual convenings like? Well, we invited teams from each of the 19 dyads to join and spend time connecting through different sessions, activities, and discussions, all while kind of discussing celebrations, things that they were really proud of and doing well, tackling challenges together and working through some problem solving. And then, of course, having those what seem to be even more rare in our remote world is those sort of in-between moments where they got to connect with each other as people. One thing I want to highlight, which was really amazing to see, and thanks to the awesome coordination of local admins and teachers, we actually had students attend, which was fantastic. So we had students from San Diego and Pflugerville school districts actually attend part of the convenings each year to share their ideas about improving math learning. So during some panel discussions and breakout sessions, the students really spoke up about what math was like for them. And I think it was, I'll speak for myself, but I know my other implementation specialists feel the same. That was one of the most powerful parts of the in-person convening, I think, was hearing straight from them. Amy, Alicia, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about that experience or anything else from the annual convenings that you wanted to share.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that you're mentioning with the students as a critical perspective to have is I remember in the first convening, a student gave us feedback and said, if you're going to pick curriculum for us to experience, could you ask us what we might like? And that was a really refreshing perspective of instead of just asking students to fill out surveys and send it back about their experience, having them be part of the exploration stage in a more direct manner was pretty powerful reminder and kind of an aha. The second was when we had caregivers there and they were able to really talk about from even their perspective of having one pedagogical approach in mathematics to another, how that kind of impacted them within their dynamic as well, which gave more insights into our implementation work on how to support that particular transition, as well to have a more community feel to mathematics in general. So those are 2 things I wanted to highlight in connection with what you were saying, Steph.
Thanks, Amy. So overall, the feedback from our dyad teams about these convenings was, very positive. They found the convenings to be a great opportunity to collaborate with each other, dive deeper into implementation concepts, and then walk away with fresh ideas to bring back to their districts. I certainly won't make anybody come off of mute and share if they don't want to. But if anyone who was at an annual convening would like to share any reflections or takeaways from that, I want to leave some space to do that. So feel free. Okay. All right. Well, with that, do we want to talk a little bit about some of the other cross-dyad connection opportunities that we had?
Yes. So the 2 other opportunities we had were cohort-wide learning sessions, and NIRN hosted 12 of these virtual learning sessions to help dyads dive deeper into active implementation while also strengthening their connections with one another. These sessions were a chance for dyads to share experiences and build relationships, and each session offered practical instruction on a range of frameworks, tools, and resources to support effective implementation. The dyads were purposefully paired to network, connect across different contexts, and discuss what they were learning. And then they also got to apply these tools and strategies in real time, and then come back as a group to share their reflections and experiences. And then with the Deep Dive Implementation Partnership Series, these were also virtual learning sessions that focus on active implementation. But these sessions gave dyads the chance to really dig into the foundations and frameworks and strategies for applying evidence-based practices in their work. This was a smaller group, so there was more time for connection and shared learning across the dyads. And these sessions were designed to be more hands-on, offer real-world examples, interactive activities, and tools to help the EIC district partners successfully implement their math curriculum. And participants met every few months for these 90-minute Zoom sessions where they worked on applying the active implementation frameworks to their chosen math practices.
Thanks, Alicia. So I wanted to actually circle back to something that was asked in the previous breakout session. We had someone ask for a scope or sequence or an outline of the learning sessions and partnership series that could be shared. And so I did just want to offer that to this group as well, that we would be happy to compile that and send that out if folks are interested. But something I wanted to highlight right now, which I'll put in the chat, is a link to NIRN's Active Implementation Hub, because that is where the majority of these implementation learning sessions, both the cohort-wide and the deep dive partnership series, really based its content and its scope and sequence from. So in the meantime, if you are interested in diving in and learning more about any of the active implementation frameworks, the AI Hub is an amazing resource and certainly the place that I would recommend starting. It has a ton of tools and resources, interactive learning modules, really anything that you could imagine about active implementation, you can find on the AI Hub. So I just wanted to plug that as a fantastic resource. Amy, you had some really good reflections from your own experience about the cohort-wide and the deep dive implementation partnership series that you shared in the last breakout. Do you want to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. What I found really interesting too about the deep dive group and the overall cohort-wide learning sessions was be able to do a differentiated approach. We knew that cohort-wide learning sessions were something that we wanted to ensure how we were supporting our dyads within this work. But then deep dive allowed us to go, well, deeper into the content and into each of the just-in-time information that we were hearing from our dyads in general as to some implementation support needs, as well as be able to be that conveyor of information across the different dyads. One thing that came from that experience was that a group of providers came to us and said, hey, we're all working in the same state. Could we get together and talk about the contextual differences that we're experiencing and how we can kind of corral together in this work being state specific? So we were able to do that as well, create another sub kind of group to be able to work through that. And doing this back and forth allowed us to think through the commonalities that we have across our context versus all the differences sometimes. So within the deep dive series, when we talk about things specifically around transition came up a lot. Lots of transitions of staff, personnel, direction, pushes from different entities within communities, change in even full districts at one point in time. Being able to just talk about the concept of transitions in general that are absolutely inevitable in our implementation work, but sit back and listen to what strategies can we learn that are being successful in one area of a dyad for transitions and apply that to another. So it gave us that opportunity to do that. And that was a big takeaway for this project is to think through, when you have a cohort model, how to kind of reach as far as you can into the margins for experiences to allow for as much participation and differentiation within the same types of learning continuum that you're hoping to gather from a project in general, and listening to your partners for their needs at the time, and being as receptive and, well, being receptive to it for sure, but being as nimble as you can to make that work within the constraints of the project.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we are just about at our time. 15 minutes flies by. But we wanted these opportunities to be kind of, short and punchy for you. So hopefully you got something from learning about the cohort model approach to implementation learning. And we just appreciate you all being here and appreciate your participation.
So, when we were thinking about implementation data, and lessons learned for the EIC, we really found it helpful to kind of differentiate data use into two general buckets. Data for continuous improvement efforts, and also some of those data challenges that limited the scope of learnings for our more generalizable learnings about implementation, what strategies work for whom and what context, and that sort of thing. So we'll start with just a quick recap of some of the data challenges we encountered encountered and observed for continuous improvement efforts. So one thing we clocked was early in implementation, district implementation teams often relied on student level data and student level outcomes to inform implementation. And that makes a whole lot of sense because student learning is really the meat and what we are doing this whole project for. However, it is a established lagging indicator of successful implementation, so it's not necessarily the best data to go to for making continuous improvement decisions related to continuous improvement efforts. And we've really found that an emphasis on implementation drivers and other intermediate level data, like what we find on the DCA and some other measures of teaming and district capacity, that it's really helpful for district implementation teams to use that intermediate level data to accurately assess system functioning, which will allow them to make tweaks and changes as they go. And then moving on to some of the data challenges we experienced for our more generalizable learnings about implementation. We found that LEA's data system capacities sometimes limited the scope of learnings we could glean for the overall impact of implementation, and that really emerged in two limitations. Districts were often unable to follow students across years and across classrooms to measure the potential impacts of implementation at the student level. And then in a similar vein, it was often difficult for LEA data systems to link student survey data to teacher data, which made it a little bit tricky to understand and parse out some of those classroom level effects. So coming away from the EIC, we really want to emphasize that bolstering LEA data system capacity can enable more generalizable learnings and findings about what implementation factors and strategies work best for whom and in what contexts. And so I kind of flew through that, but we're really excited for some discussions. And Jimena, Ellen, Megan, please feel free to chime in with anything I may have missed. But We're also very excited to hear any and all thoughts you all have about data systems and what works best for you and what our learnings kind of are bringing up for you all. Yeah, thank you.
And
Give
this,
a round of applause for Jake, thinking he's awesome. So I'm sitting there telling you guys how awesome he is. But I think if you really hear it to heart, that I think a lot of us in education, we're always, we're always looking at annual test scores of student outcome data, and you're missing the boat when it comes to really good implementation. So things like fidelity assessments, whether done through observation or other, as well as capacity assessments, kind of looking at the important things the system has to do that well, became very important to look across all those data sources. But boy, there's just a ton of data here. So please dig in and ask some questions, because it was really fun to see this work being applied to math. We know a lot of folks are doing early literacy and social emotional behavior, PBIS. So to dig in on math, please ask your questions. This is your chance.
thank you, Ellen. And if there aren't specific questions, I'm sure we can go back to our fidelity conversation that we were having.
I'll say I was curious about what fidelity conversation y'all were having.
Oh, because we were here.
It was
Okay.
in May.
So Susan, John had posed a question on our previous session about how capacity is critical and the actual planning that goes with it, and also wondering about other implementation data points such as training quality, the focus of coaching, and fidelity, right? And I think what we were talking about is how within this project, during the first year, if you, as you may recall, we weren't able to use our fidelity data because there was so much variability at all levels, right? In terms of the understanding what data we had to collect, about the capacity on how to collect it, about the quality of the data that was collected. There was a lot of challenges. Some districts had support from the providers to collect the data, while other districts had built-in resources within, or not. It was more at the district level that had the responsibility of collect that. So I think that my big takeaways, is that fidelity is something that needs to be at the forefront of the planning and conversations when you're doing a data measurement plan, and it goes beyond like just put it on the measurement plan and saying, oh, I'm going to collect fidelity data, because it has a lot of implications in terms of resources, and capacity. But it's so important. So it's not something that we can just put it there and then say, as you may recall, we had all these different listening sessions and, cohort-wide sessions specifically focused on fidelity to be able to, at least for the cohort, to find that alignment. And the alignment wasn't perfect. We did what we could. But lessons learned, I think it needs to be really at the forefront of the conversations as we plan whatever it is that we're trying to implement.
Thanks, Amanda. It looks like we have a couple of questions kind of around the issues around the fidelity sessions and talking a little bit about that, but also looking more at a DSDS, like recommendations around how to kind of use those systems to make them more usable. Not necessarily, I think, the tech side of it, but how to make the information usable, or coaching for how to interpret data from multiple sources to fix the next right step. And then just a comment, thanks, this idea of what I perceive, oftentimes at a district level, there's a lot of issues with fidelity because it's perceived as a teacher evaluation tool versus kind of looking at the system and what supports either training or coaching or informing selection are needed to make the system better. So it gets a little messy in there. So love to hear thoughts and opinions from people who've kind of gotten all muddied up around this stuff because it's messy.
Absolutely. So I want to address, so Bethany, you asked a question about the 3 fidelity sessions. I do think we have some pre-recorded sessions, so I'm happy to follow up on that, and also the other measurement requests that you had asked. Diana, you asked the $1 million question, right? What are some of the recommendations specific to consider how to strengthen data systems and to make them more usable? I think we need to, and we had these conversations among our team, right? For this particular project, we had our implementation plans. And within the implementation plan, we had to have a measurement plan, a communication plan. And yes, it is great to have the plan, right? And have something in paper. Now, reality is we know implementation is messy and nothing is going to go according to our plan. Some of things do, some other ones don't. Now, when I think one of the biggest things in terms of as a district, and you want to make sure that you're using that data, right? One of the things that we identify as a huge need across the board was the communication, and the communication at the different levels of the system. But how do we that I think the data, it's only as good as you can use it, right? I can come up with sophisticated models, but if I don't know how to disseminate that to you and how to share with you what that does mean, and we cannot tell teachers what does this mean and what are the implications and how can they improve, because this is why, but if I don't give you the how, we're stuck in the same place. And I think those are things that we need to take into consideration. I don't think there's one specific model of how to do these data systems. There's a lot of that variability and how we tailor that based on context. But I also think that we gotta take into, we have to have as an objective of what will be the best way to put this data into those who really need to use it to make change. I guess will be one of my big takeaways, from this project. I don't know, will you agree, Ellen?
Betcha, absolutely. And it kind of tags along with Melissa, who is an implementation specialist in Wisconsin and not Minnesota, but we love you anyway. She apologized if she missed this, but were there districts all using a common fidelity tool, or was it district specific? If common, was EIC supporting training, collaboration, iterated reliability around the tools, or was it up to the district to address? Great question. Real world.
So there is not the only common thing that we had on this project is like we all wanted students to benefit from the work that we were doing. There was a lot of variability across all the levels. When it came to the tool, the 19 districts were all using high quality math curricula. However, we had 8 different curricula being used within the cohort. With that being said, we had a whole bunch of districts that were using the IM, for example, so they were using the IM fidelity tool, while others were using what was aligned to their curricula. We had districts that didn't have access to the fidelity tool, and they made up their own rubric in terms of what was important for them to focus in terms of fidelity. So yeah, there was not a specific, a specific tool. We also had districts that had to make decisions based on, well, I will prefer to observe more classrooms than less classrooms. Hence, I'm going to use the fidelity tool, but I'm going to select specific items that are more aligned with my initiative. So I don't think there was a one way that fit all. But definitely conversations to have at the beginning of implementation during your exploration stage, when you're trying to look into, well, this is what we're going to do, once you make that decision, how we're going to monitor fidelity and what's going to work for you in terms of resources.
That's terrific, Jimena. And what I will say, which is light years above what I'm used to, is that no matter what provider it was, the observation tool or matrix or rubric, I got to be careful the words I use. I know it could start a war, but it was used to improve the coaching for the teachers. So the purpose of it, the form and function here, the function was to support teachers, not to evaluate them, but to support the implementation of a high quality math curriculum. And different providers did it somewhat differently, but the form and function, the function was to support teachers and administrators to learn how to use the materials well and to get to outcomes. So please add the providers who are in the audience and folks who have had similar roles.
We have 1 second. They're going to kick us out.
Thank you all so much. I always really enjoy these discussions.
I will invite you all to contact us if you have any additional questions. Happy to answer any more questions going forward.
All right. Okay, so we're going to jump in. We'll see if we can get through all of it in 15 minutes. So we're starting out with lesson learned about exploration stages, about the exploration stage. Stephen's just going to start with a quick overview of what we mean by implementation stages.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, welcome to the exploration stage breakout room. Like Yolanda said, we wanted to start by just giving a brief overview of the foundation of what are the implementation stages. So first and foremost, the stages address how implementation progresses over time. So it gives us a roadmap, so to speak, and each stage consists of specific activities that ensure practices are intentionally selected and then used as we intend them to. So to start, and the focus of this session is really around this first stage, which is called exploration. So this is to start, prior to selecting something new, districts need to engage in a selection process, which is exploration. So in this stage, districts will assess the need, the fit, the feasibility for a particular innovation. And oftentimes teams during this stage are asking themselves, should we even select a practice or program? Are we ready to do so? And staff will engage in different activities in a comprehensive selection process to determine if an innovation should be selected. And I know Yolanda will get into some more of those specific activities in just a bit. But after exploration, if a team decides that an innovation should be selected, districts then move into the installation stage. And so it's in this stage where resources are allocated and supports are developed and systems are set up for implementation. And once all of those initial components are installed, then districts transition into the initial implementation stage and begin to actually use the practice. And so during this stage, data is collected to improve supports. Teams are working to try and implement as intended. And then this last stage is the full implementation. So this is when the practice or program is being consistently used as intended, and we're starting to see positive impacts on outcomes. And so this is just a brief high-level overview of what the implementation stages are. And I do want to draw your attention. I think one of the most important things about the implementation stages is this infinity symbol that you see as the backdrop here behind the text on this slide. And so at NIRN, we talk about how this symbol really speaks to the iterative nature of implementation stages and how this process is not linear. And for example, we've seen at NIRN in the past, as an example, perhaps a district is in the initial implementation stage, and they may need to go back to exploration. Maybe there's a change of the district implementation team or a turnover of staff, and they need to go back and ensure some buy-in from that new staff member to be able to proceed and go back to initial implementation. So I think the biggest takeaway is that these stages are not linear, that these are often repeated and readdressed as district implementation teams go throughout the process. And also on this slide, you'll see here, implementation takes time. It takes what we see on average is 3 to 5 years from this exploration all the way through full implementation. So I will also say too, before passing it to Yolanda, that for the EIC purposes, what we experienced throughout the course of this project as it pertains to the exploration stage was that for many of our dyads, so our districts and our education provider partners, due to a multitude of some different factors, including the way the project was designed and some shortened timelines and also the pandemic, that there were a couple of our dyads who were not able to execute all of the exploration activities. And we saw that to impact implementation in some different ways, which I know Yolanda will speak to in just a moment. But so that's all to say, this is just an overview of the implementation stages. And I'm going to pass it to Yolanda, who's going to talk a little bit more about exploration.
Thank you, Stephen. So I know we only have a short time together, but one of the things we wanted to do in this session was highlight what we learned in the EIC about how crucial the role of the exploration stage is. this is really that stage. If it doesn't get the attention it needs, a lot of money and time can get lost and wasted because teams have to go back and redo things. So one thing that came out is that there was a real need for assessing readiness for implementation. And what we mean by that is for districts and providers needed some more time for some of them to really evaluate what was the district's capacity and resources and commitment to make this change. Were leaders on board? Were teachers on board? Were families on board? Did they have the staff that they needed? So these are all those things that needed to be put in place to ensure that smooth transition into implementation. Being able to assess the readiness for implementation really helps the district align their goals and expectations and timelines. So again, when they can highlight what is it that we're trying to achieve, what is it that we're going to do next, they could then line up their timelines. To do this assessment process, it's very critical for them to have a group of diverse perspectives so they can gain insight into the organization's readiness for change. So again, teachers, school leaders, family members, all those that have a stake in the process need to be able to share their input on how this implementation is going and why it's going along. And I'm going to touch on that again as well. But another thing to note that for this assessing readiness implementation, it is part of an assessment process. And so we do recommend having a root cause analysis done to help identify those barriers so that the team can help plan if they get to those points. But again, as Stephen was saying, one of the things we were able to learn, being a learning partner in the EIC, is that with this shortened time spent on exploration, this was one of the pieces that districts have noted that they would have benefited from spending some more time on. Another piece was assessing fit and feasibility. And again, here's another assessment. This is the twofold. One, there needs to be an evaluation of the selected materials with the actual expectations, the standards, the usability, and the capacity of the district. Why is that needed? Because there were some districts that found they started implementing a program or practice that was selected, but because they didn't have enough time to really look at the fit and feasibility, they ended up changing programs in the middle of the EIC or towards the end of the EIC, which then goes back to affecting their readiness for implementation, losing commitment from their other stakeholders, such as their teachers or your school leaders, because then they don't know that this is actually going to be sustained. Excuse me. Another component to assessing that fit and feasibility is matching the services of the external service provider with the district-specific needs. And so this was a large learning as well. Our educational providers that were part of the project all had great service plans. However, some districts had different needs depending on what the service provider offered. So for instance, there were some districts that really needed support with putting system level processes in place. However, the educational service provider was one that worked more at the school level with teachers and principals. So there was a slight mismatch in being able to provide that implementation support. Right? Two more things that we noted on and wanted to touch on were the alignment of resources. So one of the things that we found, EIC was an interesting project in that we had 19 different school districts and a number of different resources being used. But along with that, different districts also had different providers working with them, education providers, whether it was for the EIC or whether if it was other initiatives that were happening in the district. So they were finding that there were some competing resources and competing approaches into how things were being done based on the number of initiatives that were happening in their districts and their external partners. So we did note that being able to identify these initiatives and partners at the beginning to be able to align those resources could help with making better decision-making to ensure sustainability of the high-quality instructional materials. And it also allows to coordinate all those different resources I noted here, the financial, the human, and the material resources. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about bi-directional communication. This was one that came out, and I think in almost all our districts that we were seeing, they all noted the importance of communication in the implementation process. So when I'm talking about communication, I'm not talking just about dissemination, because that usually happens during implementation. The school district or the provider will send information out. But when we're talking about that bi-directional communication, we're really focused on having interaction among different perspectives through various methods. So how are you getting the information back in? We can send it out, but how are you getting it back in? So whether they are using focus groups or surveys or face-to-face meetings, having an opportunity to talk with different perspectives or those that have a stake in the implementation process, such as school leaders and families, students, because we were working with middle school students, getting their input was very important. One of the things that was noted by some of our districts is that they really used information from their student surveys that were sent out to be able to actually get a student perspective. Some had not done that before. We had a couple of districts that even had student and family focus groups and to get their information to find out what they were thinking about implementation. And that all really supports that two-way communication channel that helps to foster that collaboration and that engagement as they were going along. So these were the 4 areas that we noted that were really important for the exploration stage. And we noted that because our districts were saying, these are the things that we really wish we could have done at the beginning or spent more time on at the beginning, because it really would have supported our implementation process. So with that really quick overview, I did want to just take a moment and see what questions we can answer for you. If there's no questions, then I'm happy to share some more information about some of the tools and resources that we share with districts and providers regarding these different exploration activities. All right. If you have any questions as I'm going along, feel free to let us know. You can drop them in the chat or say them out loud. So I'm going to share some information about some of the tools and resources for each one of these roles of exploration stage. And again, as Stephen had mentioned, these are not all of the activities in the exploration stage. These are the ones that were kind of highlighted as we learned being a learning partner in the EIC, of the ones that our dyads were saying, you know, we wanted to just spend a little more time on. So one of the things was assessing the readiness for implementation. And when we went out to look, when we found from our districts and our dyads that they were like, you know what, we really want to spend more time on assessing readiness for implementation. How do we do that? We went out as a team and looked for resources to be able to support them with this. And one of the things we found is that there's not a lot of readiness assessment tools out there for educators. There were things that might link specifically to a program. There might be things that link specifically to a content area, but overall general tools, there were not a lot. One we did find was the Wandersman Center Readiness Thinking Tool. It is a more general tool that really does focus on the capacity, resources, and commitment to change. It also fosters that collaboration of teams talking to one another, getting those perspectives to figure out, are we ready to jump into this implementation? Okay. So Stephen shared a copy of that one in the chat if you are interested in learning more. For our assessing fit and feasibility, we did in the beginning of the program, the EIC, ask our districts to look at some components of their math curriculum and trying to say, you know, what standards, what usability, what some capacity, but they didn't have the time to really dig in and do that comprehensive evaluation. So one of the things that we have shared with the dyads, our districts and the providers, is the hexagon tool. And the hexagon tool is designed to support those districts or organizations with really assessing and looking at what they're currently using. And so that is one that can be used throughout. It's been used in all different content areas, outside of education as well. Okay.
Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed your second 15 minutes with your topic of choice. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Stephen McKinney for our key takeaways.
Boy, 60 minutes was not enough time for this, Rebecca. I'm seeing. Okay, so we are going to end today's webinar by moving from looking backwards to now looking at some of our key takeaways that we believe can help with forging a path forward. So, throughout the course of this project, we repeatedly came back to this visual of the cascade that existed within EIC. And we believe that one of the biggest takeaways from this project was the reiterated importance of having established and linked implementation teams at each level of the system that are responsible for leading the implementation work. And we focus so much on implementation teams at NIRN because we've seen that having teams that are composed of a diverse group of critical perspectives result in increased buy-in, ownership, and ultimately sustainability of this implementation work. And we know that moving forward, this cascade will look a little bit different for our dyads, but it's our hope that our focus on implementation teams will carry forth for our district and provider partners even after the grant comes to a close. One of the other big takeaways from this project, and I think this was highlighted in one of the breakout sessions, was the importance of having a comprehensive data approach for implementation. So we talked extensively about the need to not only look at and use student outcome data, but the need to use additional measures that provide just-in-time information or data about other areas of the system that can help drive decision-making as well. And we saw many of our dyads begin collecting and using these types of measures, including fidelity and integrity data, measures such as the district capacity assessment, all to help teams understand where opportunities may exist for improvement at each level of the system. And we also talked about the importance of being able to triangulate different data sources to be able to provide more of a complete picture of what's happening within a specific implementation effort. Next slide. And so, in my attempt to put it all together with a tidy little bow on top, if I had to try and encapsulate all that we've talked about today and learned from this project, I think it would be this. It'd be that linked implementation teams, using a variety of data sources to make decisions at the right level and the right time, equates to a strong foundation for successful implementation. But I have to say, of course, we know that implementation doesn't come with a tidy little bow on top. It's messy and it takes time. And I wanted to close by just saying how grateful we are that our partners engaged with us in this messy work. And I think I can speak for my entire team when I say that we're so proud to have played a role in each of our dyads implementation efforts. So thank you, and please keep up the good work. And I believe with that, with our last 15 minutes, we're going to transition to some Q&A time. Right, Rebecca?
We are. So we thought we would give an opportunity. You've had an opportunity to listen in on 2 breakout rooms, topics of your choice, and to hear from the entire EIC team today. So we thought we would just pause. We would monitor the chat. You can also feel free to unmic if you desire to ask any follow-up questions you might have regarding the content you heard today, questions about the project, or any other burning implementation inquiry you might have. And this is when I need my Jeopardy music.
Rebecca, is it okay for me to highlight a request from one of our breakouts?
That would be fantastic, Stephanie. Thank you.
So we had a request, I think it was maybe from Melissa, if I'm remembering correctly, about providing some sort of scope and sequence or a starting point for some of the implementation learning that was covered throughout the cohort-wide learning sessions, the deep dive partnerships, and we were talking about the annual convenings as well. So I think there's going to be something that we can probably compile. At least I know from my perspective, we have something that we can put together. But in the meantime, I did just want to put a plug in as well for the Active Implementation Hub, which I shared that in the second breakout room. But maybe we could put that into the chat here for folks. So if you're interested in learning more about implementation concepts, diving deeper, the Active Implementation Hub is a fantastic place to start. It has any kind of tool or resource about implementation that your heart could desire. So I really encourage you to check out the AI Hub. And we will also send out maybe some more specific topics that were covered to honor that request.
Thank you, Stephanie. And we also have brand new learner pathways on there to help people guide through the hub as well. So Mel, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I was curious if anybody could speak to, like, I'm really curious about this idea about the sort of what I'm understanding to be sort of a more generalized learning session and the annual convenings, and then this deeper dive that was optional. Am I remembering that correctly, Stephanie and Amy? Did you see that? Like, what was the goal of those deeper dives? Were you looking to sort of leverage that to establish almost like ISPs, implementation support practitioners, like that level of capacity among the folks that participated? Was it just a nice to have kind of thing? Or were you actually seeing sort of an uptake of implementation support practitioner competencies within those individuals as a result of participating in those deeper dives? Does that make sense? I'm just like sort of thinking about like cost benefit of those sessions and how it translated into benefits in the districts that they came from.
Okay. Does the deep dive team want to take this on?
You all into silence.
I know. I was like, we didn't prep how to answer all of your questions. Would the team that developed the deep dive content, do you want to jump in? Because that was Stephanie and Ellen and Amy. Okay.
Yeah. Ellen, do you want to start us off? I feel like you're probably biting at the bit to answer that
No,
one.
I'm waiting for Yolanda. I'm waiting for Yolanda. No, I'm waiting for Steph to take it away. You ladies are the rock there. We helped.
So yeah, the goal, I'll go ahead and jump in. The goal, Mel, was to go ahead and see how we could, I wouldn't say be as finite as saying creating like a cadre of implementation, other type of specialists around, but it was to give the opportunity of those learning sessions that we had. We had people who wanted more information about what really is more implementation work. You're telling us a little bit, but it's not quite enough to translate into something else that I'm going to be working on. You're talking about the stage of exploration, which we didn't have the opportunity to really do because of COVID. What would it look like if we would have had that space? So we were able then to kind of backfill within what we would consider just some level setting of knowledge and information. I know that we were kind of looking at some just ideas of if we were in the deep dive or we wouldn't in the deep dive, but also the layers that we were cutting through, for lack of better terminology, from providers to students was so big within that context. I will say from just an observation standpoint is that those who were in the deep dive session were able to take ideas around implementation and kind of generalize it to either the work they were doing there or even some into other projects they were about to start doing and thinking through how that learning was. And so we did that within the second year that we had our providers with us, recognizing year one of cohort-wide learning sessions just wasn't enough. And our role as learning partners was a different role. Like we were a learning partner observing, studying, and influencing implementation opportunities as also a learning partner and research partner. I'm going to see if my other colleagues want to share anything there, or if Mel, you have questions about what I shared from a high level.
I think that's spot on, Amy. And one other thing I'll add too is that I think one of the benefits of having that extra deep dive time too was that we actually had time for folks to really like dig in and practice on specific tools that just were not, did not come up as part of the broader EIC project, but, nonetheless are incredibly important resources that folks could be using for active implementation in their own context. And so those are things like the driver's best practices assessment and, just so many others. So really getting that time to actually sit down and open them up and practice, using the implementation toolbox, as Ellen liked to put it.
And I'll just add on to what Stephanie was saying. We had providers were the ones that more providers that were joining those deep dive sessions. And just from some of the providers I was working with, they actually made some tweaks to their service models based on what they were learning from the deep dive session. So how could they incorporate, and my internet is a little off, how could they incorporate the actual implementation processes into their service model? So some use the information from the deep dive to make those tweaks, to use some of the tools that we provided for them in those with their districts. So not only did it deepen the knowledge of some of our district members, but for our providers, they started to see what pieces of implementation they were actually using or implementation science they were using, and where did they want to strengthen to be able to support districts in their implementation efforts.
Okay, thank you, team. I'm just looking at both Melissa's and Diana's comments. Diana was a participant in those deep dive sessions. So thank you, Diana, for sharing your thoughts on that. All right. Additional questions that you might have for our team before we head into our closing. If you don't want to unmic, you can also put them in the chat.
I'll ask a question, Rebecca. This is John.
Sure. Hi, John.
Hey.
Minnesota.
I'm trying to compare, when we have an implementation project, often the districts are pretty close to each other or within 50 miles of each other or something. I mean, I'm just thinking of one in particular. I mean, actually, all of our projects are kind of a little different. They can be 100 miles from each other, but it seems that they often have time to collaborate with each other. And I'm wondering how much these districts that were in different states had time to collaborate. Because when I think of a linked team, I think that those districts are somehow connected in a linked way to the provider, or in our case, a region or something. Somehow they're connected, or even have representatives on that team. So I'm just wondering how that connection happened or didn't.
This is Ellen. I'd love to throw Susan under the bus. But I think if you, there was a nice example. I mean, everybody did it a little bit differently, John. So, you could have a provider and a purveyor, or a research organization and a program developer working with a district and schools kind of in that way. And also have a couple of districts they may be working with kind of touching base with each other. But I didn't mean, I wanted to throw Susan under the bus because I just thought they did a great job.
Yeah, I think we did have a unique situation because, so I work at the Dana Center at the University of Texas at Austin. We're actually the authors of the curriculum that we were working on implementing, and we were working with our provider, so who publishes our content. So I think for us, those deep dive, when we really dug into thinking about implementation and all the questions that we've been talking about here today, I think it supported because we had Ellen as our implementation specialist to help us think through, here's all these different resources. We had each part of that triad, I would say, brought different things to the table. And so we were all learning, and we were all making things better. So, and from my perspective and from my team, who are the developers, we actually are able to go back into our curriculum and make changes because of what we saw in these classrooms and through the implementation, which I think is pretty unique. I'm not sure, anybody else had that level of ability to go in and do that. So, I think that was the uniqueness of what we were. I don't know if that's.
No, it was cool. You got to adapt for cultural reasons. You got to kind of take it up to the program developer and adapt it and stuff. That was really unique to have that kind of improvement cycle happen.
And John, just to dig a little bit more into your question about collaboration is I think, and feel free to jump in, team, but it very much was challenging to find both the time and the space to get different groups to collaborate. Thank goodness we have virtual capabilities now to bring people from across the country. So while there were some challenges with providing the time and the space, it made it that much more empowering when we were able to do it. So things like our cohort-wide sessions, we always tried to provide an opportunity for both networking and shared learning. Our two on-site convenings were amazing. We had student representation there. We were able to bring everybody together, and you could just feel the energy and the discussions in the room. And I will also add that Texas, for a short while, also had a small community of practice where we brought them together to work through some of their implementation challenges that they were experiencing. Do you see this as being a scalable model for building implementation capacity for specific practices?
It depends. You got to learn to implement first. You can't scale before you implement. So you got to figure out what your transformation zone is, that group where you can find some districts who are willing to participate, willing to work out the bugs, because you're going to be disrupting a system that is not used to behaving that way. And when you figure out how to get a big enough chunk of the system to be able to do that, a transformation zone, then you can begin to think about scaling. I mean, when you're entering into this, you want to say, hey, we're going to be doing this for 10 plus years. So you really want to select with people who are going to be committed to investing in something. So is it scalable? Yes, we have examples of that. Is this the way to do it? There's sure good ideas that came out of this and some great exemplars. So again, implement before you scale would be the one thing I would put out there.
Hey, Ellen,
Sorry.
I'm not a NIRNian, but can I,
yes, you are.
add something? Because something that I was not expecting and heard for the first time, not from our districts, but at the convening from a different district, but I came home thinking, wow, that needs to happen in ours. And then it did. And that was, and I remember talking a lot to our, funder about scalability and things like that. And we think a lot about that at the Dana Center. But the scalability that I was not expecting to see that happened was to other innovations. So we were very focused on middle school math, and that's my life, and math is what we do at the Dana Center, and science. Don't let my colleagues that know science, math and science. But I was at the first convening and was talking to an assistant superintendent, which first of all, I was super impressed that an assistant superintendent took 2 days out of their lives to come, and there were multiple. And they talked about how they really saw what they were learning through this project as how to implement innovations in general across their district. And then I did see that happen in our long-term district that we worked with through the whole project. And I'm seeing it still now, right? Like it's over. And I'm hearing those, kind of executive level leaders in that district saying, this is not just about middle school math implementation, which that's all I was focused on, but it was like, oh, wow, you're right. This is helping you function as a district. And so that's maybe a slightly different take on the scalability, but it was not expected in my mind, and sort of a nice thing to see happen. So I just wanted to add that perspective.
Thank you, Susan. We are at time. I hate to say that out loud, but unfortunately we are at time. I think Susan's comments are a great way to end our conversation today, though. We're going to go ahead and put our recently published, as of this morning, brief into the chat. And please note that this brief is a labor of love. Our full team authored this together since June when we did our data retreat. So it's got all of our voices and experiences in it. It was a great experience. Please keep an eye out for emails. EIC project is not done. We are just gearing up for dissemination and sharing. And so you will see a number of outputs and really cool things coming out, and stories and potential webinars in the future. So thank you all for coming today. We will remain on here for a few more minutes if there are any other burning questions, and we just wanted to appreciate your time. So So thank you.